So yeah, one of the most, I think, fascinating things about you is that I don't think Midland, Texas, from my layman's perspective, people who aren't involved in the oil field really know you. And as far as my clients, I want to bring you to them.
Nor should they.
We
produce a commodity and we sell it, into
Sure.
a giant market. So there's no retail advertising. There's no need for any oil executive to get on TV and say, "Come buy my boots," or
Woods boots.
Yeah.
But with that being said, I mean, just like that message behind that message that you just delivered, man, the gem is in the wisdom, and when it comes to CrownQuest, I want to figure out, what's going on here.
Yeah.
What from a leadership capacity has
that?
created this culture, this organization, and honestly, that's the value. Like Midland, Texas, has a lot of just unbelievable leadership, and that's kind of what I want to showcase.
Yeah, it does. Midland. I'll say Midland's just an amazing place and a great place. One of the things I would encourage all of your listeners to do is stop saying Midland's an ugly place. That's a duty assignment that you're stuck in.
Right.
That's a narrative that has gone along here a long time, and there most certainly are people that feel that way, and that's fine if they want to feel that way.
Yes, sir.
But
it doesn't have to be.
It doesn't have to be, and the reality is Midland is one of the greatest cities in the world because it has great people who are active and engaged and highly capable, and many people that get things done in an amazing way. And so at the end of the day, you get used to your surroundings, whatever they are. You stop appreciating them like you should. And here we get a constant reminder that to appreciate the thing that's happening, because everything's changing all the time. The weather changes every 2 days, so which is nice. And we get however many, almost 355 days of sunshine or something like that. And
whether you want it or not.
And our skies are phenomenal. They're beautiful.
Yes.
You get a new mosaic, a new painting in the sky every evening. There's just a lot of things to love about this city, but ultimately, your main joy comes with the people you do business with, and this is a great business town.
Yeah,
I say do business with, do life with.
Do life with. Well, absolutely, and you and I had that in common. We love business, and that is certainly a platform in which we do life. And so, thank you for giving me 30 minutes. I want to just hit you with some questions. The first question, though, really, to be honest with you, is just, Tim, I think you're one of those great people. I think what you guys have done with CrownQuest is definitely one of those great things. So just when you say leadership, what kind of has guided? And this is just a really big question, so feel free to take it wherever you want to take it.
Sure.
What kind of has been the guiding, predominating principles in which you can say leadership does not happen by accident? You don't just wake up one day and there's a great culture.
Right.
So how did you guys engineer or design this thing from a leadership principle standpoint?
Yeah. Well, I'll start off by saying that the kind of most fundamental principle that I think I apply as a leader is that structure demands behavior.
Okay.
Now, it probably surprises you that I said that first, right?
Maybe.
But I think the best thing you can do as a leader is build structures that produce the results you want. So let me explain that. So what is a structure? A structure is a set of obstacles that creates a path of least resistance. So this building we're in here, what is this building made up of? Obstacles. That wall is an obstacle.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
Okay. We both came in through the door, which is a path of least resistance the architect designed. And we could have broken that window and coming through.
Yes.
If the door was on fire, we might have, because then that becomes the path of least resistance. But neither one of us stopped to say, do we really want to go in the door or do we want to go somewhere else? We just did it because that's the path of least resistance. The most powerful structures are mental models.
Okay.
And that's your own reasoning about what gets you acceptance or belonging, what gets you approval, what's going to get you success. You have models in your mind that tell you what that is, that create a path of least resistance. If that model's wrong, and I would say all of our mental models start off wrong, and even if you build a tremendous amount of success, or have a tremendous amount of success making the mental models closer to reality, they're still always at least incomplete. So what you want to always be doing is refining those mental models so that the path of least resistance is the outcome you want.
I see.
So you build mental models for yourself, for your family, for every organization you're a part of. That's the best path of success. Now, I think it was Drucker that said, culture eats strategy for lunch.
Peter Drucker?
I think so.
Okay.
Culture eats strategy for lunch. And that's generally, I hear that comment thrown out by people. If that's true, and let's say it is, then shouldn't you know what culture is and have a strategy to build one that supports your organization's purpose? I'd say yes. And I think that's what we figured out how to do at CrownQuest.
Wow, that's a great answer.
We use it I do that in everything I touch to the extent I'm allowed. Okay? Because you can build a structure, you can create a path of least resistance, a door, and people can still break the window. Okay? So those people still make up their own mind about how they want to do things. But, child rearing, you create a path of least resistance for your child to get, but they'll still test you, right?
Right.
So I think what we've tried to do is build a culture that supports our purpose. What's our purpose? At CrownQuest, our purpose is to create value using a risk-managed investment approach. Okay. Now, that's not very inspirational, but I had a business professor one time tell me he would flunk me if I was in his class with that, purpose statement. But
Okay.
so it works for us.
Clearly.
But you have to cast the vision of what does it mean to create value. Value is a concept. Man, people talk about, well, what's your net worth? Well, what does that even mean? What other people would buy my stuff for today if I was selling it? If you're not selling it, does that matter? Not really. So, during COVID and the oil price went way down stuff, somebody asked me, how did you feel kind of because your net worth's fallen so much? I'm like, my net worth hadn't changed.
Yeah.
All that's changed is our perception.
There you go.
Okay? I don't know what,
Yep.
So I know what my net worth will be when I leave this world, zero.
There you go.
That'll be the one definitive time when you know what your net worth is. The rest of the time, what difference does it make?
One of the most profound things I heard a podcaster say, I think it was Rogan, he just made it in passing. And I was like, oh man, he's like, we're all just renting space here.
It's just temporary.
Yeah.
It's Hubble. It's a mist of vapor that's going to be here and then gone. But it's very precious because everything we do here compounds into eternity. Okay, so that's a huge part of the paradigm I have. So anyway, what is culture? So culture for any organization, whether it be a family, a church, a social group, work, a department in a company, the company as a whole, a city, a state. Culture is the shared values as expressed by what's honored and what's shamed.
Okay. Oh, that's very good.
As expressed by what's honored and shamed. So someone can say, well, our company is all about customer service. Those words mean nothing. Nothing, absolutely nothing. All that matters is, what are you rewarding people for?
The incentive structures. Yeah.
And that is how you build culture.
Okay.
Is with structures, incentive structures, legal structures, authority structures, but most importantly, reward structures. Financial incentive is just part of it. Most people care mostly about money because it's a proxy for how you value me. But
That's so true.
What are you chastising people for? What are you patting them on the back for? What do you ask about as a leader? If you ask about something, that tells everybody this is a priority, right? So how much decision-making power do you give to people?
Oh, that's good.
So we've created a culture we call the self-governing organization.
Okay. So then so then let me take a shot at this.
Okay.
So based on the incentive structures, first go back. So going back to the obstacles. So CrownQuest is built around putting up
structures.
Yep. And these structures basically say, okay, this is the space that we want to play in. This is the space in which we want to operate in, and then you create doors of free access.
And the path of least resistance is to create value using a risk management investment approach.
There we go. Got it. And so that's what brings people in. And then when it comes to responsibility, basically what you're saying is when you operate within this space,
you're rewarded.
If you do so responsibly, there's a sense of autonomy, not micromanagement.
So you saw, you have the Dave Cooner.
I do, yep. Matter of fact,
servant leadership. You can
in case the audience is wondering, this is what we're talking about. Yes.
All right. So the Freedom V is the key tool you use to create self-governing organizations.
Okay.
And then I forget what it's called in there, the upside down triangle. So there's a legal authority, and the legal authority, looks like this. Like I'm at the top, Bobby and me are at the top, and then there's other authorities as you go down. The board's over us.
Okay.
Owners maybe over that, right? So that's an authority structure. We use that authority structure upside down because if we use the authority structure to implement our operations, let's call it, then all of these people below would be filtering information up to a handful of people that would make all the decisions. So what we do is invert that. And what we do is we use our authority to build structures within which everybody in the company is making decisions and being rewarded for good decisions. Bad decisions, they also get rewarded by having everybody understand what that mistake was so we can all learn from it.
There you go. So not punitive.
No, because there's two kinds of cultures. There's a blame culture.
Yes.
And a create together culture.
Yeah, that's chapter 2 in this book, absolutely.
Yeah, okay. So the blame culture is all about pinning mistakes on somebody. And that's crabs in a barrel. It's just you're pulling people down so that you can ascend to the top. Because if the only people getting to make decisions are one at the top, then everybody should try to get to the top because making decisions is fulfilling.
Right.
But if you invert it and you make it where most of the decisions are made by the people in the organization, then everybody gets rewarded. But if you just tell everybody do whatever, well, how in the world do you know what decision to make and what not to make? Well, the Freedom V creates clear boundaries where you say, this is the boundaries within which you need to operate.
Okay.
And then if you go outside those boundaries, then we have an issue. But within those boundaries, sometimes things work, sometimes they don't. Let's all learn from it.
There we go. Yeah, it's more of a collaborative atmosphere.
So our values, our express values are character, which is really a prerequisite to be part of our culture.
I can imagine.
Character is the ability to focus outwardly instead of everything's happening to me. I'm participating in something, okay? So that's character. Then we have team learning, which is when I make a mistake, we all share in learning from it. Now, we'll probably make fun of you for making that mistake because there needs to be some feedback, okay? But we all
totally understand.
But we all share that. Okay, let's all learn from this.
Yeah.
Don't be the next guy that gets made fun of, right? But we still.
I like that.
There's nothing punitive about it.
No.
Team learning, shared.
If anything, there's something brotherly about that.
Kind of, yeah. You can take it too far, but
brothers do sometimes.
Shared vision. So shared vision, we're all trying to create value together, and
that's the key.
And then what is value?
Right.
Well, value for who? Well, value for all of us. And we're creating value when you're learning your trade and you're becoming really great at what you do. That's value. We're creating value when our team is functioning well. And we're creating value when we make our margins wider. And we're creating value when we increase efficiency. All those things are creating value, different kinds of value.
I see.
That's why we leave it broad, because we want value for everybody involved.
I like it. And a lot of that also, what I hear is a spirit of faith. It's very easy for corporations to become restrictive out of a sense of fear. It's like almost I have to micromanage you because of the insecurity that if you don't do what I say, then we might not get the result, or I might not get the numbers, I might get yelled at from my manager. This is, hey, we're going to operate, here's the boundaries.
Here's the boundaries, yeah.
And then you have all this creative liberty as long as you're within the boundaries. Man, that is a beautiful thing.
Yeah. And now it takes a lot of work, because if you're
Obviously. Yes.
everybody's boundaries change all the time.
Right.
And we have a philosophy called promote yourself.
Okay.
Okay. So promotion is not in this way of operating. Now, this is always the legal structure, right? Because you always have to have an authority. But in this way of operating, you have to have authority before you can make decisions, take responsibility. In this one, you can have all the responsibility you want is within your freedom V. So you don't have to have authority to have responsibility.
That's so profound.
Positional authority.
Yeah.
So what we do is we're constantly adjusting people's freedom Vs as they grow, as they change jobs, which takes a lot of work. But that means the leaders are investing in the organization instead of extracting from it.
I love it. There was a guy I was listening to a podcast named Jocko Willink. He's a former Navy SEAL, and talks a lot about why the SEALs team are so effective. And one of the things that he accredits to is a marriage between decentralized leadership and this idea of extreme ownership. And basically, it seems like that's exactly the same idea that you guys have incorporated.
Yeah, there's a body of thought out there called the spider and the starfish.
Okay.
And it started off as, most organizations are like spider webs, it's central control and everything's controlled. But, a starfish, you cut off its arm and it grows another starfish. So that's better. Decentralized is better. And then of course what happens is you get so decentralized that there's no unity and it falls apart.
Yeah.
So that was real popular, and then it started not working.
Yeah.
And so now the typical things to oscillate between the two. No need. Use the spider for the authority structure and then apply it to the starfish orientation and let everybody be free to create, but just create clear boundaries.
There you go. And then that's the obstacles and the free access. Yeah.
Well, it's the structure. It's the role definition, the tools you give people. It's the objectives, clear objectives it's how you reward those objectives. So I try to be real intentional. I make almost no decisions in our company.
Okay.
Very, very seldom I'll make a decision. I've spent a lot of time building structures, very little time making decisions. Okay. Now,
that was one of my questions.
I will make decisions, and they're usually pretty high-level decisions.
Sure.
Like, do we buy something or do we sell something that's of a large magnitude? But most of the daily decisions I don't get involved in, because the structure. But I do watch the outcomes, and if the outcomes are not what we want, then we have a leadership tool in there called SLY.
Okay.
SLY, and that's a mental model for leadership, and it goes like this: S in SLY is structure. 85% of the time, if we have a miss, it's a structure issue.
Okay.
If I believe that, and I'm the leader, and I think my main job is to build structure, then every miss, I can take responsibility. 10% of the time, it's leadership, which means I didn't correctly communicate the objectives, which means 95% of the time, I can take responsibility for a miss. 5% of the time, we've got somebody that's just never going to be on the same page with us, and they just shouldn't be part of the team.
There we go. Yeah.
It happens.
Sure.
It's rare.
And yeah, oh boy, there's like 16 different directions I want to go.
Yeah. Well,
That's how
people only have so much attention
right,
span.
right.
So.
Well, okay. There's one of all the questions I have. Let me just pick one.
Okay.
Because this is ultimately the direction that I want to go here with the remaining 10 minutes we have.
Okay.
To really bring it home to the audience. The hardest part probably of being an executive seems to me, as Dave Ramsey calls it, being the chief reminding officer. You just have to
Okay.
to the organization through all its various departments as to what the purpose statement is, right? To what the vision, the mission, whatever you want to call that.
So one of the most helpful things I was ever told for leadership that I try to practice religiously is that when you've gotten so tired of saying something that you're ready to puke, everybody else is just beginning to. So for me, I'm a high intuitive person and a big vision person.
Okay.
So my natural bent is if I thought of it, you should already know.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
So
that can get frustrating.
that's a long, incessant repetition is about as far unnatural for me as anything you can imagine.
I can see that. All right.
But it works. And so what I mostly repeat is not the vision of the company, it's the servant leadership culture stuff.
There we go.
Because if we get the culture right and we get the incentive and we get the mental model and the structures right, like, what are we trying to create, then, good things happen. Now I'll tell you this story. So we have goals we do every year, but the oil business is hyper interactive. Everything you do affects everything else in the company. So when you say one thing, like we're going to have our lifting costs be this much money, that can set off a string of events that actually destroy value if you're not careful. Okay, because everything's connected. And so one of the values, shared vision, team learning, shared mental models, which is culture, character, I already said that's a prerequisite, and systemic understanding. Okay, we want to understand that everything's connected.
Okay.
No one's in a silo.
That's the spider web.
That's the spider. Well, the spider web is the idea of central control. This is a different concept. It's really a concept. It's kind of like the spider web and the starfish. They're connected, so you can't. If you oscillate back and forth, you have an oscillating system. You need something that accommodates both, and that's how you do a systemic understanding. Okay, so we have and we'll have 40 goals, and we had a session and we go over them twice a year. How are we doing? We had a session where the guys came in and said we had this goal for electrical submersible pumps cost, and they said, well, we blew this goal because. We're spending twice as much as what we had originally said. The reason we did it is because we figured out we could make a lot better wells with a bigger pump, and so we chose to ignore that goal because we can create more value doing it this other way. And I stopped the meeting and tried to reward people for that thinking as much as I possibly could.
There you go.
Because that's systemic understanding. They didn't get stuck in I'm responsible for this one goal, so I got to make sure I do it. So I'm going to destroy a bunch of value over here to make me look good.
Oh, and yes.
Which happens all the time in a systemic. Like we were doing some deals with some people. We were selling them some of our water, excess water. And the guy comes in. I don't remember the actual numbers. I'll make up some numbers. Like, well, we'll sell this water for 50 cents a barrel. And they said we only pay 35. I said, well, okay, good luck getting 35. I can get it over there, 20 miles away. It's going to cost you 50 cents to pump it over. It's going to cost you 85 cents a barrel. Yeah, but that's a different department.
Oh, yeah.
I'm judged on my acquisition cost.
No, that's a great contrast.
Okay, that's lack of systemic understanding, right? You destroyed value, but that person's goal was met. So we always try to keep our goals in the context of the overall purpose, create value. And when I see an opportunity to reward that kind of thinking, I try to go out of my way to do that.
I love it. Yeah, and that speaks to the incentive structures of promoting the culture of collaboration Yes.
collaboration.
Having faith in the team as we operate within the sandbox.
We had another instance where we had a huge boo-boo. I mean, it was a bad one. It was one where nobody made fun of anybody because it was just really bad.
Okay.
We fracked into a well that was being drilled because everybody assumed that no one would do a frack on a well that was going this way. Everybody assumed it went that way because surely no one would make that kind of bad of a mistake, but they did. So everybody assumed and nobody checked.
Got it.
And so, and this has been some time ago, actually many years ago now, when we were regularly first gearing up to do horizontal drilling. In that particular instance, I spoke at an operations meeting, and I can remember these times when I speak because I do it pretty rarely. But at this meeting, I stood up and said, okay, this is a really bad mistake. We can't afford these kinds of mistakes. So I need a fix. Somebody stood up and said, we can do this. When we won't frack into our own wells anymore. And I said, it's not just our own wells. If it's not just us doing it. We can't let somebody else do it to us either. And they said, well, we can do this. It was like an information tracking thing that they'd come up with, and we can make sure it doesn't happen to anybody. I said, oh, that's great. Let's do that. Now, the worst thing that we can do is let this pull us into a don't make a mistake culture. So let's don't make assumptions. Do create this tracking thing where this doesn't happen again, but don't start getting into don't make a mistake culture, because we'll lose a lot more value that way.
Oh man, yeah. I've got like 2 questions on that alone, but we've
Sure.
only got time. Let me.
Well, go ahead and ask me those 2 questions,
Yeah.
and then you can finish with one other.
Actually, to finish this one, so you've already answered this one. How do executives successfully embody and communicate the purpose statement to their team? But to the individual, I mean, we can take these principles as parents. We can take these principles as
Yes.
friends, because at the end of the day, I think you and I both move with the presupposition that leadership is for everybody, not just a select few.
That's right.
And leadership's actually what gives your life meaning. So putting yourself in a position where you have responsibility to serve others is exactly how you want to position yourself.
I say it a little different than Dave, but you mentioned this earlier before we went on camera. Like, leadership is just the commitment to get from here to there.
Exactly.
Okay, so whatever it is you want to do, I want to write a musical. Okay, well, if you've got commitment to get from here to there, you're a leader. So yeah, leadership is what brings meaning to life because it brings creativity and progress.
Yes, sir.
So if you're stuck in not knowing where you are, or if you refuse the accountability of articulating where you want to go, then you're going to spin in a circle, and that's always going to end up with bad self-destruction of some sort.
So let me take this possibly on our final note of this conversation to a place of maximal application.
Okay.
And that is to everyone who's watching this, most of which are my clients. And so one of the principles that I've reinforced in the relationship that we have is that finances aren't happening to us, we are happening to finances. We are partnering together so that we can use this thing called money as a pathway to accomplish values, right? So with that being said, to the individual, how does everyone who takes the time to identify their transcendent there, embody and communicate that to the people that they have influence with? Because I think the danger to this conversation, and rightfully so, can be, man, Tim is an interesting person. And man, the oil field is an interesting place. And man, I'm glad there's some people who are doing it right. But how does that affect me?
Well, I would say I'm involved in many organizations of different kinds that are applying this, including our own family. And when you apply these principles, and irrespective of where your value base is, this is timeless wisdom.
Yes, sir. It is.
You can go to the current volume of business books, and if you ask yourself, like, oh, how do I do Covey? How do I do Collins? How do I do Maxwell?
Yeah.
Do those things, and then you're implementing their principles.
Yeah.
You can go to Solomon, and 3,500 years ago, that was the good to great, 35 years ago was Proverbs, right? And Ecclesiastes, right? You can go to those, it's the same basic ideas, okay? So when you set self aside, serve a purpose that's bigger than yourself, always works a whole lot better than when you try to bend reality to yourself, which never works, okay? So now, I think one of the things you have to do if you're going to be a creating person, you have to recognize that good leaders constantly create conflict.
Ooh, talk to me about that.
All right.
That's good.
So we usually think conflict is bad.
Right.
But that's because we mostly do conflict badly. So most conflicts are counterproductive, and you want to avoid all of those.
Okay.
You only want constructive conflicts. And constructive conflicts is we are getting past that obstacle to get there. Okay, so when I come to you and I say, hey, this what we're doing isn't working, your immediate natural reaction is defensive.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
You can't you can't help it.
Yep.
That's just the way we're wired. But if we have a shared culture where we're committed to get there, and we have these tools like the moment of truth tool, and I say, hey, we're going to do a moment of truth, let's get shared facts. I don't want my story versus your story, because this isn't me versus you. We're on the same team. I see these facts. What do you see? So now we're getting shared facts so we can have a shared story, because we want to get there. If you or if I refuse to have a constructive conflict, then we'll have a counterproductive conflict. And if it's something that really matters and I'm a leader, I have to win that conflict. It may mean that you got to go, okay? But most of the time, that's not what people want. Most of the time, people want to be constructive.
Yes.
So it's up to me as a leader, structure, leadership, you. I need to understand from you what the facts are, because I probably have a wrong structure. I will take responsibility for that. I need to understand, if I'm assuming here I'm the authority in this conversation.
Sure.
I assume here that I probably have been unclear on something. I need the facts from you to know where I've been unclear. So I'm not now blaming. I'm now asking you into my world, and I'm inviting myself into your world, because we're a team. We're on the same team. We're getting there. That's
and
constructive. We're syncing up.
Yeah.
So in CrownQuest, it's gotten so expected that that's what we're going to do, that people share facts and truth all the time.
That's the sweet spot.
And they don't really take it personally.
I love that.
Because it's just what we do. And arguing about the facts happens all the time, because they're not my facts versus your facts.
Right.
They're the facts. And the question is, which facts matter to this particular circumstance? And, we argue about it constantly.
I love it.
But it's not me versus you.
That's the perfect way to just take it. I mean, that is, if everyone worked in that type of an environment, they would love getting up every day. If everyone's marriage operated in that sweet spot, then we would absolutely love being around each other. If families operated that way, if your friendships operated that way, if the community endeavors that you are involved with operated that way.
Well, and everything I try to do is to get things into that manner. Now, if you're going to do that, then you have to fight for it.
I can imagine so, yeah.
You have to fight for it, because if something's critical, then you got to win. And that part's easier for me. But so because my natural bent is conflict, but my natural bent is me versus you, and I'm going to win. Okay, so I have to pull off of that and say, no, it's not me versus you. It's us versus that obstacle, and we have to go there. So I have to learn that.
I love that.
I also have to learn, if it's not mission critical, I don't need to mess with it. I need to avoid. And there's a whole conflict resolution thing in here that I'm describing. And if it's important to you but not me, then I can accommodate. But if it's mission critical, I have to, as a leader, insist on cooperation. We need to get to collaboration. And, it must be. And I'm not going to let it go until it is. Okay? Now, if you're going to do that, then when you are starting to set a culture like that, lots of feathers gets ruffled. Because everybody's used to accommodation and niceness, not for the purpose of serving the mission, but so that you'll like me. It's actually very selfish. Niceness is not a biblical value. It's a selfish value. I want you to think well of
Jordan
me.
Peterson does a great job articulating that, without a doubt. Yep.
So kindness is biblical because I'm thinking of your best interest.
Yes. Yep. Yep.
Okay. So you have to, as a leader, you have to learn what's mission critical, fight for that, make sure it's not me versus you, and learn to avoid and accommodate. If you're naturally an avoider, then you have to learn to confront the things that matter. If you're naturally an accommodator, you have to learn to confront the things that matter. If you're naturally a collaborator, this one's tricky. You tend to assume everybody's with you because that's where you want to be. But if you don't go through that conflict piece to get there first, they haven't really bought in. They're just accommodating you as the leader.
Yeah.
They don't really own it.
Right. And then it's devastating because you think they are until you realize they're not.
And now what happened? And now it gets personal.
Yeah. Yeah. Without a doubt.
And as a leader, you have to learn never to make things personal and never to take it personal.
Yes,
If you want to serve the objective, the organization, this is nothing easy about this, but if you want to really serve the organization's objective, then you always have to find ways to set aside self. And, there can be a lot of, especially if you get into a situation with factions, and you wade into that because you believe in the organization's purpose, you're always going to end up with enemies out of that. But, you either serve that purpose or you don't.
Yes, sir.
And and if you've got a faction, and they may be misinformed, most often they have a contrasting purpose. And so that's a structure thing again, right? We weren't clear about what our purpose was. Or the organization said one thing and did another, which is pretty common as well.
Yeah.
And so if you're going to be the person that fights for that and says, this organization says this, but we're doing that, well, you're going to, you may lose a job or something over that. Okay, that not normally well received, but you're either going to be committed to get there or not.
I love it. Tim, I think we've reached capacity as far as what we can download into this conversation, but there's just so much packed in that final note.
Read the book, though.
It's a great book.
I recommend the book. Dave
Absolutely.
did a really great job of putting, I would say, a small percent of what we've learned into this, but it's a good start.
And I think so. So it is Servant Leadership.
Second edition.
Second edition. Tim wrote the foreword to this, right?
I wrote the foreword.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's on. I'm currently at the end of it, going through it, and I highly recommend that everyone reads it too. One of just the note to end on, as far as just maximal application. You say, well, I'm not in the business like, you and Tim are. Well, the leadership principles again from this are very biblical, and at the end of the day, especially the last part of that conversation that we just had, man, I'm taking that as from a leadership role, from how I am as a father, to how I am as a husband,
wife,
yes, yeah,
mother,
yep,
son,
yep,
daughter,
yep.
You can use these principles.
Trusted advisor, ministry capacity. This goes in everything.
It works everywhere. And when you start seeing life falling apart, it likely means structure, leadership, me. I've got a bad structure. I'm not being a good leader. I can't opt out of myself, right? So it's those. I've got one of those two problems. And then you have the opportunity to act, learn, adjust. And you confess your sins. He's faithful and just to forgive the sins. That's a great thing. Always opportunity to take a fresh start and learn from your past mistakes. And we like to say you can't control the past with regret. You can't control the future with anxiety. And you can't control the present with anger. Okay?
That's so good.
What you can do is learn from the past,
yes, sir,
hope for the future, and build structures that get you from here to there in the present.
I can't think of a better note to end on, Tim. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Absolutely.